Your mic is off, so we didn't hear an aye.
Director Penrose.
Here.
I can unmute hers.
Did you mute her?
No,
Oh, there she
no,
is.
I didn't mute.
I've lost the screen.
Penrose.
I've lost the screen, so I can't see anything. I hope you're not going to do any power.
We see you.
We see you.
Okay.
Roll call. Roll call.
Yes.
There I
Vote
am.
again, please. Director Penrose.
Here.
Okay, Director Lohman.
Here and I, whatever we're voting on.
Director Dye.
Here. Aye.
Director Rodak.
Yes.
Director Blanchard.
Yeah.
Chair Slater-Gatta.
Purpose answer.
Yes.
Okay.
So the consent agenda passes unanimously.
Yes, I need to make a small change in the 3A where I need to add the resolution number. So that's a minor change. I'll document it, okay?
Thank you. Moving right along to regular business. Item A, receive and file SAM audited financial statements for fiscal year 2017-18.
Yes, so the SAM audit, the 17-18 audit report, as well as the decision analysis and the management letter has been attached to your packet. And if there are any clarifications or questions, we have John Cropper here who can answer any questions.
Well,
I'll leave it open
Kishan,
for any
are
questions.
you going to address my concerns that were raised? And I think you had agreed to certain things that were going to happen.
Yes, I can. Let me just bring up your notes. Just give me a minute.
Yeah, I'll have, this is Debbie. I'll have some questions as well.
Okay, go ahead, Debbie. Can we have your questions first, please?
Yes, so to Mr. Cropper, so you didn't express an opinion on the financial statements.
That's true. If you looked at our page 1, normally you're used to hearing we have an unmodified opinion, and that's what used to be called a clean opinion or an unqualified opinion. And we were headed in that direction with great hopes of doing that. But when you read through the SAS 115 management letter, you kind of get an idea of what we ran up against. We had 2 material weaknesses that were discovered during the audit. You have a material weakness, it means that we could be producing financial statements with errors that would not give us comfort. We weren't able to find sufficient evidential matter to express an opinion. Largely, it boiled down to a lot of problems with journal entries that were being done haphazardly without controls. George will tell you, and I think Peter would agree, that they were pervasive and they were troublesome to the point where we disclaimed the opinion. Now, the financials look just like that, but there's a big difference on our opinion page. So that's 100% right. And so I would say, when you go ahead and you look at and you read those financials, if you ignored page 1, that's what the board pleases to do, is express an opinion. In this case, I would say the management letter becomes of a lot of use and a lot of value to the board.
So basically, the lack of an opinion basically indicates that the auditor does not feel confident in the numbers presented in the financial statements.
We do not have evidence. We went down through much of the balance sheet and we're able to get comfortable with key numbers like the cash number. We recreated the accounts receivable, the accounts payable. But yes, you're 100% correct. When you really look at it, we are recommending couple things in the management letter, including control of the journal entries. As you know, this is the period of time where you had a staff member who was in charge of your financials. I mean, she was doing a lot of the journal entry booking, a lot of the reconciling, a lot of things. And she was kind of on her own little reservation for a while, and it wasn't discovered early. And so that was very troublesome. So we do have issues with the numbers to a point where I would say next year it's entirely likely, because of these material weaknesses, that we will have a prior period adjustment or two. We, in your current financial statements, if you go to note 11, you will see a couple prior period adjustments. One was a normal one for OPEB. Everybody had that. That was a special district. Mm-hmm. But then there were a couple other ones that were having to do with things that we could not get comfortable with.
John, could you adjust your camera? We can only see the top half of your head.
How's that if I scoot back a little bit?
Thank you.
Yeah.
I think the other thing you might want to do, instead of having it on a matrix view, is just put John as the only person on your screen. Because on mine, John's on the bottom row of the...
Well, it's fine the way it is now.
I scooted back a little bit. I was kind of I was belling up to the desk a little bit so I could read, but I'm looking at it just to
tilt your camera forward too a little.
Yeah. So yeah, we had two material adjustments, or two material comments, 1801 and 1802. 1801, it's titled Administrative Issues, Accounting Personnel and Journal Entries. That also existed to a degree in 2017, but it wasn't as pervasive and as material. And then the second one was the computer system, 2018-02. There were a couple other comments, but they were significant deficiencies. Those first two comments led us to disclaim the opinion.
So I think it's safe to say, this is a transitional audit report.
I would agree with that. I think
Yeah.
Peter, and be honest with you, I think Kishan was, right in calling Peter in. I think it's been, I'd kind of be interested in hearing George, what he has thought, but Kishan showed a lot of leadership, saying, this is bigger than I am. I need some experts in here. Mm-hmm. And that was the right call. Yeah, you really did need Peter and Mays to come in and work with us. Mm-hmm. And we're already kind of working with them. Kishan and Peter are pushing forward 2019. These are 18's financials that we're talking about today.
So I think we're going going to a better place.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Changes that we're making are going to produce documents that we can be pleased about. But I do have one more issue I want to discuss, and that is, so I'm a little bit concerned or confused about the reserves discussion. And it looks like you're saying there are no reserves, while the management response says there is.
So you're in the management letter and you're referring to long-term emergency reserves, the 2018-04.
Yeah, and the management response, it's on page 75.
Okay, I don't have that. I have page 4. I have the actual letter. Let me just comment briefly on that. In 2017, we did have an issue with, to start off, we had a unrestricted net position that was negative. We felt that the cash scenario was such that, yes, there are sanitary districts that are giving money to the authority, but those are separate entities. The authority itself is its own entity, and it has certain rights under state law to act as, a sanitary district, essentially. apart from those others, and it needs its own reserves. And I think you're saying in that response that, yeah, you've got a couple reserves, but we kind of felt in 2017, and this year wasn't that different, that had you had adequate reserves or been able to deal, and we don't really know this for a fact, but there were fines that were levied having to do with that that large pipe that needed to be replaced, right? And you had a $600,000 fine. You kind of think that that's an example of what we were trying to say with the long-term reserve.
So is the next audit going to indicate there are reserves, or?
Well, it depends. It depends if there are adequate dollars, you know, that show that we have a positive position, then we would, of course, remove the comment. But when we have negative reserves, well, unrestricted net assets that are negative, it's troublesome, and it doesn't look good on your balance sheet.
So I'm guessing the fact that we're investing heavily in capital kind of leaves us, looks like it leaves us in a poor position in cash that we can use for emergency repairs and operations. Is that?
Well, you know, what happens with an expense like when you invest in the plant is that is taken out of expense and it is capitalized, so it adds to your asset. And in your area, your fund balance or your equity area, you would have, there's three areas that you have. You have the capital assets net of debt. You have unrestricted and restricted. And I'm specifically commenting really about how much unrestricted you have. So if you were to take all your assets, subtract out all your liabilities, you're left with equity. Or in this case, because it's more of a governmental entity, net position. We're looking specifically at the one area of your net position that's called unrestricted. That's essentially what I consider your cash to spend. Even though it might not be your cash, it's what's after you collect all your receivables and offset your liabilities, what's left. I can see Barbara wants to say something.
I really want to say something here. I spent a long time talking to, looking into this and talking to our manager and talking to Kishan about it. And I think Kishan agreed that we're going to pull our responses off and take a serious look at the finance committee level on the reserve question. And we
absolutely, you are totally entitled to do that, Barbara. Yeah.
Because there are several ways to look at this, and it's complicated. And I don't feel that the management response in these documents is sufficient to really convey what the actual situation is. I'm not prepared to sit here tonight and make a solution, but in talking with Kishan today, I think we have come up with a somewhat of a solution to the reserve problem ongoing, and to take a look at that as an organization. So
I love that idea. I'm all for it. Kishan and I talked
Maze on that.
Kishan and I talked earlier today, and he had told me, and I assured him, I have no problem taking this management letter and having you redo, you know, management did give us the management responses, but I'm totally ready to reissue the letter with a different management response, because I do think you as a board want to use this letter and articulate your board position, because the authority is using this letter probably, I mean, in a very transparent way. As auditors, the management letter we have restricted. I pointed out to him, Kishan, that is, the last paragraph, which reads that we restrict this only to the board management. But in a real world scenario, with transparency, you don't want to hold back this kind of thing. Most people are going to have an idea of what's going on anyhow.
Yeah.
Also, we need to understand these issues and make sure that the actual situation of Sam is properly presented. And I propose that the finance
Right.
really take a serious look at that and then come back so that we can
Absolutely.
audit tonight without accepting the management letter and the management responses. And so that's what I would like to see us do, because I think it's complicated and we need to really figure out what the deal is in terms of reserves and so forth. And in terms of this budget going forward, there's been changes today that I think is going to help with that. So
Excellent.
that's what I'd like to see us.
I want to make sure that we're not just presenting it in a favorable light, but that we're actually adopting policies that commit us to a certain course of action that, is material.
Yeah.
I think that's good. I have a question about these reserves, and that is there's a fairly strong statement in the budget about the amount of reserves we have. And so I'm confused by one statement that says we have no reserves, and yet another statement in the budget that shows quite clearly we do have reserves. And I'd be happy to read it.
Today.
Well, I think John Cropper pointed out that the real crux of the matter is that we don't have sufficient unrestricted funds to back us up.
That's right. I don't want you to be confused.
Talk for a minute. Petition address this, please.
Yes, Sam.
I'd like to finish my statement.
Okay.
Thank you. I apologize. I had forgotten that this was an old management letter and an old audit. And at that point in time, we had no reserves. And I think one of the things we need to keep reminding people is that we are in 2020 right now, and we have made significant changes since this audit letter. And we have, if you look at the budget, substantial reserves. Not enough. We're almost $900,000 short, but we've come a long ways as a board. Thank you very much. We're doing a good job, and we've hired good people. So a lot of the things that were mentioned in this management letter, I think we need to look at closely with two pencils. One is what we need to continue to improve, and the other is what we have already done.
And Kishan brought up a comment when we were talking. He says, well, we need to do this as of 6/30/18. And I said, yeah, I want the responses to reflect today. In other words, I'm issuing the report today. So the comment may have existed at 6/30/18 with the financial statements there, but it doesn't mean that you as a board haven't handled it. And that would be an ideal time to highlight what the board has done based on the comment that the auditor had. So it should be current. So if you corrected it, you should say it's corrected or we're close.
So if we went through the management letter,
yes,
and we just put next to each comment corrected as of such and such, or working on this, these are our plans, that would be
excellent.
Excellent.
You actually did that. You actually did a really good job addressing journal entries. I was very happy with what you guys had done. As you addressed it, you owned it, and you said, here's what we need to do, here's what we're doing. But I don't want the board to misunderstand what unrestricted net position is. If you look at your $2 million in cash, that's not what I'm talking about as a reserve. I'm looking at the fund balance at the bottom. So there can be confusion there. Right.
Anybody else? Debbie, you had more things you wanted to say?
No, I think I've made my position clear, is that we need to address the reserves going forward. And, you know, part of that's going to be working with the individual agencies to get, you know, a certain level of commitment to, you know, help us go forward. So I'm done.
I love that, Deborah. I love that. That's perfect. You know, and
Okay.
it's not easy to get everybody together thinking the same way. But the underlying principle is you are an authority. This is the board of an authority. It's not representing 3 small special districts. You know, you have the permit, the sewer permit. So the state looks at you differently.
Well, we have the permit, but the individual agencies provide all the funding.
Absolutely. And I get that. I do get that.
Okay. Jim Blanchard, I heard you had a comment.
I agree with your comments in terms of keeping things current and also looking at the reserves, as you have said.
Excellent. Well, thank you.
Rick Lohman,
No more comments. I'm just trying to stay online here and talk to everybody.
okay. Deborah Penrose. Whoops.
Deborah, you'll have to unmute yourself.
Nothing further.
Nothing further. Okay. Well, I think that what we see in this is a very positive trend on the part of this agency, and I'm very proud of all of the board members and Keishan and the member agency managers and the staff, with great thanks to Mays, and in particular on staff, George and Keishan. I think we're making great progress, and I'm pleased with the direction we're going. I think the next couple audits will look much better.
I agree.
That's what we're in, you know, I agree, and I'm not, you know, you do not want to have prior period adjustments, but these comments that we have on material weakness, it would not be surprising to me is if we did have a couple prior period adjustments. But again, we probably will have a better opinion, and we're headed in the right direction. And I think you get that as a board. So, you know, I'll just leave it there.
Good. Well,
Can I say something?
please.
We're going to refer some of this to the Finance Committee, and we're going to look at the responses from Sam to these issues so that we all really have a clear picture, because how we respond, I agree. I'm really happy to see that we're allowed to respond as of today. And I think
Yes.
are a number of issues in here that we need to really be clear about and come together on. So I would look forward to meeting with the rest of the Finance Committee and going over this stuff.
That's good. And Barbara, I'm sorry, I've only got 9 faces showing up on my screen, and I don't know how to make it show everyone who's signed in. If anybody has a clue, let me know.
The speaker view. Speaker view.
You're in the speaker
Well,
view.
yeah, I can do speaker view, but it does, when I'm doing a roster asking if everybody has spoken, I kind of look at faces. I'll just do speaker view. Anyway, good. Well, John, I think we look forward to working with you on getting a very strong financial set of a strong set of practices and policies for our finances.
And Peter's doing a great job working with Kishan and everybody on that.
Keishan has something to say.
Yes, I would like to further add that we will take it up with the Finance Committee, and we do have means of cash management by which we think we have adequate reserves. So we'll bring that up after the Financial Committee approves it, okay? So that should not be a
This is what we worked out today. It's very exciting.
Sounds good.
Finance Committee?
Come again?
When's the next Finance Committee meeting?
I'm planning to have it organized for next Thursday, if it's okay with everyone. We have
You're talking about next week?
Yes, not this week, next week.
Great,
Okay.
thank you.
Do we need to make a
Carl's waving.
motion? Do we
Carl's
need to
waving.
make a motion to receive this?
I don't
I
think
think
so.
you've received it. Go ahead.
Carl?
Yes.
I think you've received it, but it couldn't hurt to have a motion in a second and say that the board has officially received it. That
Okay,
couldn't
since,
hurt. Before you do that, I wanted to point out, if you go to the bottom of your screen, Chair Slater Carter, there is a little area called participants. If you click
Yeah.
on that, you'll get a list off to the side.
right, okay, I will use that then, thank you.
And I
Thank
think
you
we'll
very much.
only be receiving the actual audit. We're reserving the response to the communication of significant deficiency and the other document that is in response to the audit. So
Is that a motion?
sure, I move that we receive the audit and that we defer accepting the communication of significant deficiencies and the management discussion. And well, I guess we can't change the management discussion and analysis, right? So all
No.
effective. All right,
You certainly, you can, but those financials have been issued. We really probably should move on. I think Peter was involved in that. Kishan was involved in that.
that's fine. So then we receive both of those and reserve the right to make adjustments or revisions to the communication to our response.
Your responses only, yes.
Deficiencies.
I second all that.
Okay, a motion by Director Dye, a second by Director Lohman. Roll call, please.
Director Penrose,
Aye.
Director Lohman,
Yes.
Director Dye,
Yes.
Director Rada,
Yes.
Director Blanchard,
Aye.
Chair Slater Carter.
Aye.
Okay, good. Motion passed.
Good. Let's move on then. Thank you, everyone,
All right.
for this.
Everyone, looking forward to a finance committee meeting where we can delve into some of these issues. And
It does seem like a board, you guys are getting along pretty well, and I'm happy about that as well. So if there's nothing further, I will drop off, Kishan, or is
Yes,
that okay?
yes, John. Thank you very much for.
Okay.
thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Moving on to item B. Where are we? Discuss proposed general budget for fiscal year 2020 and 2021 and authorize the general manager to submit it to member agencies for approval.
Yes. So we had discussions on the general budget with the member agency managers last week. And there were certain recommendations by the member agency managers which were implemented. Now, prior to discussion with member agency managers, we had shown an increase of budget from last year by about 12%. And subsequent to the discussions with member agency managers, it was suggested that we defund two positions, which was the engineering and construction contracts manager and the accounting technician, to which we agreed to it. And we further reduced the budget from 12% to an increase of about 9%. So that is the budget which is presented in the packet today. But on reviewing it and on looking back at what things have been happening in the world and particularly in the United States with the economy going down with the virus issues, we thought about it, discussed it, and we feel that it's better that we revise it further, and we would like to probably adopt the 19-20 budget or make it much better than that. So which means we do not want to show any increase in the budget, and we would like to get it back to the board in either 2 weeks or 4 weeks from now and bring about a reduction in the budget and see where all we can improve it further, and possibly projected something projected identical to the 19-20 budget with no change, and come back 4 weeks later with with the point in mind that we would probably bring a mid-year budget refund rather than a mid-year budget adjustment. So these are all the things we'd like to see it with a sharp pencil and see where all we can reduce it further in the light of the present situation. So staff is recommending that we do not move forward with this budget, which has been presented.
Well, do we have comments from the board?
One comment.
And then Deborah Ruddick, after you, Rick.
Yeah, Kishan, I think you had a general managers meeting last week. They provided a whole bunch of input. Was all that input included in the budget that you're presenting tonight? Or were there a lot of comments that didn't make it in and therefore you want to delay it a couple of weeks more? Or?
No. All the comments made by the general managers have been incorporated in the budget.
Okay.
So nothing which was not incorporated. Further to that, staff reviewed it and felt that an increase is not recommended in the present scenario. And therefore, we'd like to go back to the 1920 budget and try to see whether we can make it much better than 1920.
Okay, thanks. That's it.
Okay. So my understanding is from my staff, they're saying that the budget as presented tonight is actually higher than they expected. Not that much higher, but higher. So in any case, I'm in favor of taking another look at it. I think it's incumbent upon us, given the change conditions, to take, another close look. So I support it.
Jim Blanchard, what do you think on this?
Yes, I agree.
Okay. Director Penrose, just nod if you want. You're on mute.
No, I think we have to be as fiscally conservative as we possibly can be given the COVID crisis. And if there's anything we can do to cut down on the budget, I'm for it at this point. We can always adjust upwards. It's very hard to adjust backwards. So I would agree with Keishan, let's not accept the budget.
Okay. Director Dye?
I agree with that. I'm happy. We do have a timeline, so if it can be done in 2 weeks, that would be great. If not, I understand. Can you address the reserves question, because that could be another positive change in the budget going forward. In looking at the current budget, the issue of the reserves, they were talking about the money market fund and the LAIF fund, but we also had $2 million in the checking account. And so, I asked some questions about that, and I think there's been some resolution that might help the overall cost for us and the need to come up with more money for reserves. So can you address that, Kishan?
Yes, so we did touch upon it during the audit review, but to delve further into that, we discussed with May's consultant this morning, and it is possible to move some cash from the checking account to the local agency investment fund, which is a LAIF fund, which is also the emergency operating funds. So put together money market and the LAIF, we should be able to take care of the reserves, and therefore the narrative in the budget would also be changed to where we would say that there is no deficit in reserves. So we will definitely discuss it with the finance committee before making any such drastic changes.
That's good news, everybody. We're not going to have to, if this is true, which makes sense to me, then we don't have to come up with additional money to create additional reserves.
Yes, and we've got.
So we'll look at it when they come back, and the finance committee will look at it as well.
Well, I do think we. Excuse me.
I agree with Director Dye. I think that one of the great stresses of years past was having to come to the agencies mid-year for a budget adjustment. And I want to make sure that if we're going to be changing the budget, we come out with a surplus that we can put in reserves or send back to the member agencies. I think if we had to go to our ratepayers needing more money mid-year, like next December, we would have some serious problems for all involved. So I want to make sure we can cover all of our expenses and that we have surplus to be able to move to the reserves. The reserve situation is something that has bothered me since before I was on SAM, and it I'm glad this board takes it very seriously now and is working towards a solution. Debbie.
Yeah, so are we still remitting to the agencies leftover funds? I mean, that's been brought up in multiple audits. If we're still doing that, I think we need to stop. I don't agree that we should.
Absolutely.
Yes. We've not been doing it.
I think
you've not been remitting?
No.
Good.
I think one of the things the finance committee needs to do and the board as a whole needs to do is work on our independent financial consultant staff and board members and develop policies such that our reporting is easy to know what's coming out of every account and why. The problem, as I recall a long time ago, was a long previous general manager was reportedly using some of the reserves for pet projects that he didn't think would be taken care of by the board. And so the board's reaction was to just figure that everything was fine and we didn't need reserves and we could always go to, and Sam could always go to the agencies to fill in the holes that developed. Clearly that didn't work. It left a major problem. And so I would like to see a set of policies perhaps put in the bylaws we're working on that define the financial independence and the financial transparencies so everybody is clear on it in the future.
I agree.
Yep.
Good. So we are done with this item. Everybody agrees. We will talk about it again in 2 weeks. And the managers are aware of this as well, Keishan?
Not as yet. I would need to communicate to them. I was waiting for the board to give a decision and then I'll talk to the managers.
Okay. Good. Well, we'll have it back in 2 weeks then. Moving on to item C, no action having been taken on item B. Authorize general manager to reject all bids for the construction of the wet weather storage expansion project and provide direction for rebidding.
Yep. So on December 9th, 2019, the board approved the design for the wet weather storage expansion project. So SAM staff advertised for the bids. The bids came in the month of January, and the bids were extremely high compared to the engineer's estimate as well as the budget. The apparent lowest bid was close to 1.3 million, while the budget was about 700,000, and the engineer's estimate was 800 to 900,000. So due to the much higher than anticipated bids received, staff reviewed it with the managers as well as did an internal review and found that the best solution would be to reject the bids currently and go out for a rebid, because there's a good chance that we might get bids at a lower price in the subsequent months. Plus, there was also a recommendation that at the same time, we also give an option for the contractor to bid for 400,000 gallons as well as 200,000 gallons. because it was felt that the contractor, when he bids for a 400,000 gallons, will be much lower than just twice the price of a 200,000 gallons. So, and therefore, staff has brought it to the board to take a decision on this and allow the staff to reject all the bids and go out for a rebid. Any questions?
Before discussion, I so move.
Do we have a second? And then we'll do discussion.
Second.
All right, second by Director Lohman. I'm sorry, motion by Director Lohman, second by Director Blanchard, and now we're into discussion. Debbie Ruddick, comments?
So I agree that we ought to reject the bids. But I would like to see us evaluate alternatives other than in-ground storage. And I think it would be great if we could take a look at those and present, to the board of SAM before we go to any further design or new bid of any underground alternatives. I think I am concerned about funding anything that's greater than 200,000 gallons for sure. And my understanding that Dan Child anyway had recommended previously that we take a look at alternatives like enhancing the Portola pump station process. So I favor looking at alternatives. I'd like to, if possible, get that part of the motion. But I do want to indicate that I would have to, I think oppose anything over 200,000 gallons unless we had something totally justifying that.
I don't understand. I hear your opposition. I don't understand it. Given how much assistance the existing $200,000 or gallons was when we needed to control flow for projects going on in the SAM plant.
Well, no, we were talking potentially about increasing it to 600,000, right?
Total.
I'm talking about 200,000 additional to what we already have.
Right. The concern. Oh, so you're saying we add another 200,000 and not another
proposal for additional 200,000 to 400,000. The current facility is how many gallons?
The current facility is 200.
Right.
And you're saying limit it to 200 total.
Well, yeah, I mean, for expense reasons for one, but also we don't, we haven't seen the justification that would, that I think that's rational. We had some sort of back of the envelope thing as far as my understanding is, but we don't have a hydraulic analysis. I just think that right now it seems like it would be frivolous for us to spend money on another 400,000 gallons, and we, haven't really seen data justifying an additional 200,000 gallons.
Okay, thank you. Rick?
The motion isn't to spend and build 400 extra thousand capacity. The motion is to get the quotes so we know what we're doing. The quotes, we might as well quote the extra 200 plus the 400 plus, because then we have the information. Anybody who wants to propose, as Dan has, alternatives, fine, go do that also. But to make any kind of decision, the more information we have, the better. So I repeat my motion, and let's go out and get the quotes and see what happens.
Okay, we have a motion and a second, and we're in discussion. So Barbara Dye. Discussion, nothing.
But I agree with Rick that getting the information wouldn't hurt. I do.
Director Penrose.
Complicated question.
You're muted. Deborah, you're muted.
I think getting the information is always a good idea. The more information you have, the better. But that would include the need for it. There is an expense, there is time put into sending out a bid. I would rather know whether or not it makes any sense to send the bid out at all before we decide to send a bid out. So I would like to hear what Dan has to say about that.
Are you talking about alternatives, Deborah?
Yes.
Well, I think the bid was simply for the wet weather storage expansion project. I would suggest if we want a separate bid for what Dan is suggesting, we send out a separate bid document.
I was not asking for a bid. I was asking to hear what the alternatives might be.
Okay, but the motion on the table, as Rick said, is to reject all bids and provide direction, direction for rebidding. So you're talking about expanding the rebidding, even though we don't have a project.
What I am saying is this bidding is premature.
Okay, thank you.
And I would like Dan to speak up.
I just asked Jim if he had a comment, and I see Debbie Ruddick, and she's after Jim.
No, I'm fine. Yeah, good question.
Okay. Debbie.
Well, I would like to suggest an amendment to the motion that says, reject all bids, but I would like to see us develop, amend the request for proposal to get an evaluation or an identification of potential alternatives to, in the ground storage. If it's a pump station or, whatever it is, maybe somebody has, some creative ideas. And I don't want a contract to just come back to the board. I want staff to come back to the board for authorization to enter into an agreement. Not just have a contract come back. I want to know what it is ahead of time that we would be agreeing to. So, but my amendment to the motion would be to, for the firms bidding to evaluate not just the ground storage, but potential other alternatives, identify potential feasible alternatives.
Okay, Rick?
My motion stands. If anybody wants to propose that we study any other possible alternatives, I will support those motions also. It's information. There is no contract. There are no dollars spent other than sending out a bid, which is what we need to do. We are one storm away from a major disaster because we filled up the current storage twice. This is information. There is no contract. There is no money other than sending out bids. So if anybody wants to back Dan's plan for replacing all the pumps or whatever that presentation was, that's fine. We can do all of those. We should study everything we possibly can because this is going to be expensive. So study all the alternatives. My motion is just for this one, and I will support other motions also.
Okay, let's do a roll call vote, please, Keisha. Oh, Barbara?
Excuse me.
Well, I just want to say, I agree that I don't think asking contractors who would be bidding on putting in the underground storage system to also evaluate alternatives. I agree with Rick that I agree with Deborah that if we can investigate alternatives at the same time, I think that's fine. I think that's a good thing to do. But I don't see any reason not to send this out for a rebid so we maybe in this changed climate get some different numbers. I don't know.
Deborah Penrose?
Well, I wanted to hear Dan's comments on it.
Yeah, I'm happy to hear Don.
And in addition, I can't support something that is a bid for 400,000 extra gallons. I'm happy to support a bid if Dan agrees for an additional 200,000 as we sent it out before. But I'd like to hear from Dan on this.
Okay, it's my recollection, Dan. Pardon me, Barbara?
The bid would be for, people would be asked to bid on both. It's not like on 4 instead of 2. They'd just be bidding on both.
We could also make them to bid on 200,000 and 2 million gallons. I don't get it.
It's my recollection that Dan suggested looking at the 400,000. Rick, make your comment, and then Dan, after Rick, you're after Rick.
The 200 and the 400 are the sizes that we could even conceivably do. You can't do more than 400 more because there isn't any room.
Unless Half Moon Bay wants to put in some.
So this is information.
That's right.
If people want to block information that we can use to make a final decision on all the options we want to discuss, that's fine. This is information.
Thank you. Dan?
I definitely think you need to reject the bids, as Keishan has replied and as the motion is on the table. There is a lot of information that's available that the board has not seen in a long time. It was presented to the board over years. It started back in 1998, you guys, which most of you weren't on the board back then. Some of you may have been, but and gone clear through 2015 with different ideas and different reasons for doing different types of work. And I think it's important to get that in front of you. And obviously, the project that I mentioned at the last meeting, I think that's got some legs to it. We've done some more research, but my recommendation would be to reject the bids and have us come back at the next board meeting with information for you. It's all but ready to go. We didn't bring it at this meeting because we just, at the time the budget was on the agenda and we were afraid it was going to be too busy, so we didn't want to do it all, but we can be back in 2 weeks with an information of various projects, why you should do it, why you shouldn't do different things. And I'm fine with putting my head on the chopping block of which one makes the most sense to you. And then go forward at that point of giving staff direction to move forward with however you want to bid at that time. I think right now you might be, honestly, you're a little bit premature in making a decision to put anything out to bid. I don't think the bidding climate is going to get anything but better in the next few months. So it's worth taking a couple of weeks to take a look at it, in my opinion, but that's my opinion.
I can live with that.
Thank you. Any more comments? All right, roll call vote, please. Rick?
Catherine, if we stall 2 more weeks before we even start getting bids, then again, we will have lost 2 more weeks, because let's say we have 3 other alternatives then. Okay, then we still won't know what the costs and the new costs of the underground expansion is. So it seems strange that we are trying to block some information that will help us in the future.
Agreed.
And then
I don't know why people don't want the information.
That information is the bidding for the project as it stands?
Yes, Dan, whatever you want to present is fine. I want to hear it. But why waste 2 more weeks? I don't know how long it's going to take to get the bids out, but we could lose a whole nother month for nothing. Why not start the bidding process while we're bringing in all the other, you can bring in 10 alternatives. I don't care.
Right.
But why waste more time? If we keep wasting time, then we're going to lose the whole year again, and we're going to be into the rainy season and can't do anything.
Deborah Penrose?
Yes, I wondered what is the cost of sending it out for a rebid? And I'd like the answer from Keishan.
The cost would be just the advertisement in the newspapers for 3 subsequent weeks, and I believe it doesn't go more than $1,000.
And there's no cost to staff time.
Come again, I didn't hear you very well.
There is no staff time cost.
Very minimal cost.
Okay. Thank you.
Well, I would, just a minute, Deborah, and then Deborah, you're next. I would note that the cost went up extravagantly because we postponed and deliberated for years. I hear the same process starting all over again. And I don't like the liability of a spill. And I hope we can get spill insurance. I know it would be expensive, but for projects that were committed to the Regional Water Quality Control Board, and then the agency changed their mind. So I'm hoping we can get that kind of insurance. Deborah Ruddick.
So I just want to clarify. So it would be looking at not just the 400,000, but it would be looking at the 200,000.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So I'm just going to throw something out here. I might be, off base, but I don't think it's necessarily the case that lower bids are going to come back. The state's talking about an infrastructure stimulus bond for November. The feds are talking about an additional 2 stimulus pieces of legislation that's going to focus heavily on infrastructure. I'm guessing if people think they're going to qualify for federal or state stimulus or both, that they're going to project high. So I don't think there's any guarantee now or a couple of weeks down the road that bids are going to come in lower.
That's why you go out for bids. Then we answer that question.
But aren't we already over the deadline for the existing bid?
Yeah, we stalled long enough that I think March 31st was the expiration of the bids. So by stalling for 2 meetings, we lost that opportunity. So we're going to bid again. I don't see what the problem is, people.
Keishan,
turn some lights on here.
Did the bids expire at the end of March?
Yes, we do not have any confirmation. We contacted with the apparent lowest bid contractor last week, and he was supposed to get back to us by the end of last week. He did not. So I'm not sure whether they're still going to value the bids or not, their bids or not.
Okay.
Carl has got his hand up.
Carl, I see you. You're on mute.
I know, I was trying to get my mouse in the right place. Keisha is correct. The bid opening was the 31st of January, and the bid by their terms that are held open for 60 days. So without an extension, it would have expired on March 31st. And Keisha has indicated the low bidder did not agree to extend.
Okay. Director Penrose?
Yeah, I'd like to say that my purpose in bringing this discussion into a discussion rather than just voting for it before the discussion even took place, was to make the point that the more information you have, and by that I mean the more alternatives are looked at, as Dan Child has already suggested, which is why we hired Dan, and that my point was not to not vote for this. I intend to vote for it. That's not my point. My point was not to delay things. My point was just to get more information. Thank you.
Well said. Let's call the question. Roll call vote, please.
Director Penrose?
Aye.
Director Lohman?
Yes.
Director Dye?
Aye.
Director Ruddock?
Aye.
Director Blanchard?
Aye.
Chair Slater Carter?
Aye. Great discussion, guys. Thank you. Moving on to...
I do want to say that I hope that Dan brings forward his information on whatever alternatives you might have.
I agree.
Right. And we're moving on to part 2 of this. Authorize the general manager to enter a contract for performing phase 1 of the hydraulic analysis of flows into the SAM system during the 2014 to 2019 period.
So at the request of the board, staff prepared an RFP and sent it out to 7 qualified firms. Of the 7 firms, 3 responded. The RFP was actually divided into two phases. Phase one was a desktop evaluation of the information which is currently available, and that is what is being discussed right now. We have the proposals from 3 consultants for the phase one, and SRT Consultants is the apparent lowest bid for this, and that is because SRT has already worked on this and has data readily available until 2018. They have to put in a little bit of efforts to gather the 2019 information, while the rest of the 2 proposals which we got from two consultants, they'll have to start from scratch. Therefore, their cost is, and this is what we'd like to bring to the board and up for discussion, please.
What is your recommendation, Kishan?
My recommendation, staff recommendation, is go with SRT Consultants because it is the data is already available and we need to do only for 2019, and the results will be known very quick rather than starting from scratch with another consultant. It's going to save us money and it's going to save us time.
Okay, Director Ruddock.
Yeah, so just some clarifications. So the analyses we're going to get will build existing hydraulic analyses of the individual collection systems, or just for the area that we're trying to address?
You're breaking. I could not hear you very well, Director Ruddock. Could you please repeat your question?
So the analysis is going to build on existing hydraulic analyses of the individual agencies' collection systems, or is it focused on the issues in Montera, El Granada area? Like, what is the focus?
The RFP, what is attached in your packet, clearly indicates that it is a study of the flows which have been going on from 2014 to 2019 in all the 3 agencies.
So the flows coming into the plant?
Yes.
It just seems silly to me that you know, we're about to undertake our own hydraulic analysis. So, and I'm guessing the individual agencies have their master plans for their systems and do their own analyses. So I'm not sure I see the point of, for instance, doing Half Moon Bays when we're going to be funding our own. Why would we fund our own plus our own through, you know, SAM? And then my next question was, would the information be valuable for any project that we might undertake, not just the underground storage, or is it just focused on the underground storage?
It would be for any project, not necessarily only for the underground storage, because it was going to address what are the flows coming into SAM.
Well, since we're about to launch our own and paying for our own, I think that you could probably leave us out.
Well,
Okay.
I think, when is yours going to be finished?
I don't know, but it's teed up.
Okay. Any more comments, Director Dye?
How much is the cost for SRT to do it?
Pardon me?
How much is the low cost?
The cost is $2,500.
Okay, for 2,500, it seems to me that your more extensive and probably more expensive analysis would be a good cross-check, but it wouldn't hurt to have one consultant. And for $2,500, it seems to me that's a reasonable thing to do now, to have a report that looks at all of it from the same, and then will be an excellent cross-check.
Good. Rick?
I think it's great Half Moon Bay is going to do another study. That's fine. But that isn't a complete analysis of the whole system. So this is a pretty cheap update to give us, you know, the whole system approach. And then when Half Moon Bay gets their data, let's factor them all in together. That's a good idea.
Well, I do think cheap is good.
Yeah.
Director Blanchard,
Oh, I agree. No, I,
Director Penrose.
Yeah, I think 25.
Uh-oh, you froze. Uh-oh, we couldn't hear you. You froze.
I said, I think $2,500 is definitely worth spending.
Good.
Okay.
Motion by Director Dye,
Second.
second by Director Ruddick. I would like to add that we maybe find the cost of a peer review on this, just so that everybody's comfortable. And that would give us all the level of comfort that this is not being biased as some have considered.
Who's considered that?
I am not at liberty to name names. Dan?
I don't think you should be saying something like that unless you can name a name. That's pretty outrageous.
It was, honestly, it was me.
Thank you.
I just felt like it would be good to have a fresh set of eyes looking at it, but with the significant price difference between the three proposals, it seems like it makes good sense. And this is a desktop at this time. One thing, if you really want to know what the system's dealing with in the long run, I think the other two entities are probably going to need to do the same thing that I understand. Now, I didn't know it at the time when we first started this, that Half Moon Bay is looking at doing a full system analysis. So it'd probably be good to have everybody do one. But I think this desktop analysis gives us a good snapshot in time to be able to know what we're dealing with. And for $2,500, you can't go wrong. So I think it's definitely worth doing.
Okay, Rick.
Yeah, Catherine, I agree with you on that. But I think in some ways, if Half Moon Bay is doing their own review, that could count in some ways as a peer review. If it comes up with the same kind of information, which, you know, valves are valves and pumps are pumps, so I would hope it would. If the data is in agreement, then we kind of have a peer review. If the data is significantly different, then we have a whole different problem, which we can address then.
Okay, well, I am only bringing that up because in addition to Dan, I have heard of general managers having questions that on stuff that Sam has done, and so it's been problematic. We can always just keep a peer review in our back pocket. Anyone else?
No, let's move forward and get both studies in and then see where we are.
Okay, let's have a roll call. We have a motion and a second, and let's have a roll call vote.
Director Penrose,
Aye.
Director Lohman,
Yes.
Director Dye,
Aye.
Director Ruddick,
Aye.
Director Blanchard,
aye.
Chair Slater Carter.
Yes. Moving right along to scroll down here. This is an easier one. Thank you, everyone. I think we're making good progress. Adopt resolution 3-2020, amending and extending upon resolution number 2-2020 to make further determinations and delegations in response to the San Mateo County Health Office order dated March 31, 2020.
The background to this is on March 23rd, the board adopted a resolution declaring the existence of a local emergency and ratifying certain emergency actions. Subsequent to that, on March 31st, the San Mateo Health Officer released an order, and therefore this resolution has come to the board. So I would request if Carl would like to add a few words to that, then please go ahead, Carl.
Sure. One of the important things that changed with the new health officer order on the 31st of March was that they reined back on public works projects, including And so there's only certain types of public works projects that are allowed to proceed. They're not determined not to be essential unless the local agency determines that they're essential. And they also, it also helps that they be capable of immediately necessary. And by way of executive summaries, one of the counties, and these counties are working in lockstep, one of the counties indicated that it's not immediately necessary. It won't be completed in a year. So I thought it would be helpful, since the district, the authorities Sam's got a couple of really important projects coming up, that we have a resolution that lays out that the board is in support of these projects in particular, and that they're essential and that they're going to be accomplished within the time frame, so they're immediately necessary. So that's basically the purpose of the resolution, is to rope those projects in particular, the completion of Granada, Forest Main, the segment 4, and the digester cleaning.
Okay, Rick?
I move the staff recommendation.
I'll second.
And second, or motion by Director Lohman, second by Director Penrose. Roll call vote, please.
Director Penrose,
Aye.
Director Lohman,
Yes.
Director Dye,
Aye.
Director Ruddock,
Yes.
Director Blanchard,
Aye.
Chair Slater Carter.
Yes. And item F, the last one of regular business, update on emergency digester cleaning project, and determine by a 4/5 vote if there is a need to continue the emergency action.
Yes, the digester cleaning is has still not been done. It's still required to be treated as an emergency. And the latest news that we've got is that the contractor is willing to take up the cleaning of the digester next week. So he would probably mobilize next week and then take up the work. So we are pretty close, and probably by the end of April, we should be done with it.
Good.
But on this meeting, we need to still continue the emergency action on the digester cleaning. And therefore, we would need a 4/5 vote.
So moved.
Motion
Second.
by Director Penrose and the second by
Rick.
Rick Lohman. Roll call vote, please.
Director Penrose,
Aye.
Director Lohman,
Yes.
Director Dye,
Yes.
Director Ruddock,
Yes.
Director Blanchard,
Aye.
Chair Slater Carter.
Aye. That was a unanimous vote on item F. Ending regular business and moving on to general manager's report.
I have nothing to report right now. We would normally make our detailed report in the second meeting of the month. So nothing particular. Business is going on as usual. Sam's staff is staying healthy, maintaining the social distancing and other required guidelines. And as I said earlier, work is going on as usual, and staff is always ready to tackle any emergencies coming up.
Hey, attorney's report.
Oh, you're muted.
Carl.
Okay, sorry. I just report briefly, the legislature is not in session. We're not exactly clear when it will be in session. The Casa State Legislative Committee canceled the meeting for this Friday because there was nothing to say other than we don't know when they're coming back and how they're going to come back and when.
Oh, how nice.
Okay.
Director's reports. Do I see a report? Director Ruddock.
Yeah, so going back to the legislature for a moment. So as you may have been aware, the Senate and Assembly were considering, and the governor actually, a climate resilience bond for the November 2020 ballot. Given the COVID response, the climate bonds are morphing into a general infrastructure stimulus bond that will have some climate adaptation components of it, but it's going to deal largely with infrastructure projects that create jobs. And some of those will be sanitary sewers and roads and other things, but it's going to be an infrastructure bond. It's probably going to be a fairly big ticket one too, because they're going to have to incorporate money for like the wildfires and things like that. So climate resilience bond out, infrastructure bond in.
Good. We can all use the upgrades. Moving along, any other directors' reports? Seeing none. Topics for future board consideration. We have on the next agenda the budget.
Yes.
Okay.
And we also have Dan's report.
Okay,
Yes.
Dan, you have on our next meeting, yes. And now we're moving into closed session. Are we going to sign off and then dial back or link back in?
Or we can ask the rest of the people to leave.
Yeah.
If they could do that,
Okay.
then you guys can stay on.
And we need to turn off the recording.
Yes.